Thank you, Sue, and thank you everyone for your interest in today's presentation, Wondering About Hearing Loss and the Key Signs to Notice. I'm Jeanne Coburn, the Supervisor of Audiology in Baystate's locations in Springfield and Palmer. I joined the Baystate Audiology team 21 years ago when neuro-otologist Dr. Ted Mason came to the area and we started the Baystate's cochlear implant program together. Our team of audiologists provides services to children and adults in the Western Massachusetts region, including hearing evaluations, hearing aids, and cochlear implant services. Joining me today are audiologists Lauren Linton and Kirsten Petrarca. Lauren joined our team 10 years ago and currently works at Baystate Wing Hospital in Palmer. And Kirsten joined our team in 2023. We happily welcomed her to our Springfield and Palmer locations. Next slide, please. So we do have a third location, which is Baystate Franklin Medical Center in Greenfield with audiologist Julie Fisher, who is not here today. If you're ever interested in coming to see us for an appointment, the number is listed, 413-794-5600. Next slide, please. Kirsten's going to get us starting today talking about hearing loss and communication. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Jeanne. All right, so like she said, my name is Kirsten. I'm one of the audiologists on the team here, and I work in both the Springfield and the Palmer offices. So I'll be talking to you all today about some signs of hearing loss. So things that you or even your loved ones may notice day to day, and the strategies that you can use to communicate more effectively when it's hard to hear. Next slide, please. All right, so first it's important to talk about hearing loss itself. Hearing loss can be very different for different people in terms of the onset, severity, and configuration. The onset of the hearing loss is often slow and it'll develop a little bit at a time over a period of years, but it can also be fast or sudden. The severity can also vary widely. Some people have a mild hearing loss, which only makes it difficult to hear soft sounds, and others can have a severe or profound hearing loss, which makes it difficult to hear most all sounds. The configuration or the shape can also be different, meaning that some people have difficulty hearing only low pitch or only high pitch sounds, but others may struggle to hear both. And there's so many things that can cause a hearing loss, including certain medications, head injuries, infections, and noise exposure. Next slide, please. So what are the effects of a hearing loss? So when untreated, hearing loss can have a negative impact on many different aspects of one's life. Research has shown that untreated hearing loss can lead to fatigue, social isolation, and cognitive decline. Those with untreated hearing loss may experience fatigue or exhaustion simply because listening is effortful. When you can't hear as well as you used to, it takes much more effort and energy to listen to others. As a result, many people will withdraw from social groups or settings, and there's many other emotions that can play into this as well. And together, fatigue or that effortful listening and isolation can increase the risk of cognitive decline. But that's a discussion for another day, and we actually will have another presentation in the fall, which we invite you to join for, where we will be talking about that more in detail. Next slide, please. So who measures a hearing loss and how? Audiologists, so our team, we are the primary healthcare professionals who evaluate, diagnose, and manage hearing loss. A hearing test completed by an audiologist is the most accurate way to measure a hearing loss. The test has several different parts, but the one that everyone's most familiar with is when you raise your hand when you hear the beeps. This part of the test is the most important because it tells us the softest sounds you can hear across a specific range of frequencies. By plotting those softest sounds on a graph, which we call an audiogram, we can create a picture of a hearing loss and have a better understanding of how it can impact someone's ability to hear certain sounds. So let's take a look at the audiogram or the graph on this slide. If you read it from left to right, you're looking at the frequencies or the pitches of those beeps from low to high, like a piano. And then if you read from the top to the bottom, you're looking at the volume, so from very soft to very loud. On the graph, the red O's are for the right ear and the blue X's are for the left ear. So this graph would show someone who, in both ears, can hear the low pitches pretty well. They can hear them when they're very soft, but the higher pitches must be much louder to be heard. Next slide, please. Did you know that 1 in 3 adults over the age of 65 has a hearing loss? As we get older, the most common hearing loss we see is called presbycusis, or age-related hearing loss. This is a type of permanent hearing loss that affects both ears. It can start when you're as young as 40 to 50 years old, and it's progressive. It slowly gets worse over time. A lot of the time, it's hard to know that you have it because you've learned to compensate it for a while. This type of hearing loss affects the high frequency sounds more than the low frequency sounds. This means that high pitched sounds like birds singing have to be much louder before you can hear them, but you can hear low pitched sounds like your dog barking pretty well. A hearing test that shows this kind of hearing loss will look a lot like the graph on that last slide. With this kind of hearing loss, a lot of people will say that they can hear, but they can't understand everything that someone says. Let's look at this another way. Next slide, please. So when they say that they can hear, but they can't necessarily hear what someone's saying, there's kind of two ways that hearing loss can impact what you're hearing. The first is going to be there's a loss of sensitivity to sound. So think of this as that volume. So on the slide, you can see there's two boxes there. There's a very large box that has the word however, but there's also a much smaller one on the bottom that says the same word. With hearing loss, that smaller word on the bottom is kind of how you're hearing on a normal basis without any kind of intervention. It's very hard to read that box and that word in the box on the bottom just because it is so small. When we use any kind of intervention, especially a hearing aid, that amplification makes it more accessible. So it makes that word larger on the screen, or it makes it louder when you're listening. It makes it much easier to be able to hear that word. Next slide, please. However, there is a second part of that. When you have enough hearing loss, what can also happen is a loss of clarity of the sound. So before, when we had the word however in the box, we were able to see every single part of every single letter, and we were able to read it easily once it was loud enough. In this case here, we have letters that are missing their parts, so it's a little bit more difficult to read the word. So you have that smaller box on the bottom. With our hearing loss, it is a little bit too small to read, it's a little bit too soft to hear, but on top of that, we're missing part of the message. It's distorted, it's not clear. Even if we use a hearing aid, it's nice and loud, so it's loud enough to hear, but it's still not quite clear. So the first time you're looking at this might be hard to tell what it says, but it does say cabbage. Next slide, please. It can be really hard to notice when you have a hearing loss like this, especially when that volume and the clarity play together, but there's some signs that we can look out for. From your point of view, you may notice that it's hard to hear or understand what's said if there's a lot of background noise, like in a restaurant, or if other people are speaking very softly, or if they're too far away, like if they're across the room or even in a different room. In a lot of situations, you might notice that you can hear them, but you can't understand them. They may sound distorted or clear, just like that word cabbage. And you may need people to ask them to repeat themselves. Besides people talking, you might also notice that you have to turn the television volume up to a level that might be uncomfortable for other people. Or you might notice that you can't hear sounds that you used to, like the oven beeping or the doorbell ringing or even the water running. Like we've said, it can be really hard to notice these signs because these changes happen so slowly over such a long time. This is why it's also helpful to ask your family and friends what they might have noticed. Next slide, please. So others might notice that it's difficult to get your attention if you're focused on something else or if there's a lot of background noise. They could notice that you miss or even misunderstand whole parts of conversation. And because of that, they could notice that your responses to a question don't quite make sense because you didn't hear or understand what was asked. Sometimes they might notice that you zone out in noisy or large group environments because you're unable to hear or understand what is said. And on top of that, it can be exhausting to have to work to understand. So there's a lot of signs that someone may have a hearing loss, but there's also a lot of strategies that you can use to make communicating easier when you can't hear well. Next slide, please. The first thing that you want to control is the distance. Face-to-face communication is crucially important for better communication. Be sure that whoever is speaking to you is doing so from the same room and that they're facing you. It's very difficult to hear or understand what someone's saying if they're facing the other direction or speaking from a different room. Besides the speaker, you can also try to control the environment as much as you can by reducing the background noise. Sometimes you can control it, like if it's the television or the kitchen sink, you can turn down the volume or turn off the running water. But sometimes you can't control the noise, but you can control how much of it reaches you. For example, if you're in a noisy restaurant, you can try to sit in a booth instead of at an open table or bar, try to block some of that noise that even gets to you. In all situations, you might still find that it's difficult to understand what others are saying. Then you can ask for repetition, but be careful not to just say what or huh, be specific. If you only missed one word, then ask for that one word. If you are more specific in what you're asking, it's easier for others to meet your needs. Next slide, please. In the end, the responsibility of improving communication does not fall only on you. Help your friends and family to help you by educating them on how they can help you to participate more easily in conversation. And if you don't think that you have a hearing loss, but you're concerned for someone else, you can keep these tips in mind to be able to help them as well. First, you should try to get their attention. If there's a lot of noise or distractions, it can be really hard to identify who is speaking and what they're saying all at once. Next, you have to remember how important face-to-face communication is. It's also your responsibility to make sure that you're speaking to them while facing them, preferably from the same room. And also be sure to speak clearly, so not too fast and not too slow, and don't over-enunciate because that can actually make it harder to understand what's said. What you say is also important. You should try to use full sentences instead of short phrases or single words. By giving more context, it can be easier to fill in the blanks if you do miss a part of what's said. And when asked, please repeat what you said. If you still find that they can't understand what you're trying to say, then maybe change it up. Revising or rephrasing what was said can sometimes help because sometimes a different word or sound can be easier to understand. Next slide, please. So let's look at a specific situation. Kind of how would all of these tips play out in a real life? So say you are out to dinner with your friends or with your family. You might choose to sit at a booth or a table closer to the edge of the room, so make yourself farther from the noise or try to block it out. You might move whatever is at the center of the table. If they have a bouquet of flowers or a large pitcher, move those so you'll be able to see everyone more clearly. Your friends will try to get your attention before speaking, and they might just do this by tapping you lightly on the shoulder or making eye contact. And when you need repetition, they'll be specific in what they say, and they'll be patient to repeat or rephrase however you need in order to keep you engaged in that conversation. Next slide, please. So these tips and tricks are only the tip of the iceberg. In your own life, you or a loved one may find that different strategies work better for you, and that is okay. When these strategies aren't enough to help you communicate with those around you, please share your concerns with your provider, who can refer you for a hearing test. Next, Lauren will talk to you all about what that appointment is and how we can use a hearing test to figure out how to best help you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Linton. I am an audiologist at our Baystate Wing Hospital here in Palmer. So I'm going to talk to you today about hearing aids, basically what to know and what comes next in regards to them. So the first thing is everything, as Kirsten said, starts with a hearing test. It lets us know if you need hearing aids, are they even an option? So we start with that test. A few things that the hearing test tells us is the degree of hearing loss. As Kirsten mentioned, it tells us how much hearing loss is there, what type of hearing loss is it? Is it a hearing loss that is permanent, that amplification hearing aids would be most beneficial for? Or is it something that medical management, such as seeing an ear, nose, and throat physician, might be more appropriate? The hearing test will also tell us about understanding of words. So going back to the slides when Kirsten mentioned the difference in the loudness and the clarity. If we turn the volume up, how is that understanding? Are things clear or is there some distortion there? It also lets us know if amplification is appropriate for you. Some people might have some hearing loss and hearing aids might not be an appropriate recommendation at that time. Their hearing might be a little too good for hearing aids. And then certainly the final thing is, what are your options? What type of hearing aid would be the most appropriate for you based on your hearing loss and your needs? So one question that you should think about is, who should you see for hearing aids? There are two different providers in the community that work with hearing aids. The first option is an audiologist. The second is a hearing instrument specialist. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit into detail about what our different roles are. So as Jeanne did mention at the introduction, we are a team of audiologists here at Baystate. Audiologists have a doctoral level of education or a master's level of education meaning we have gone for advanced graduate work beyond a bachelor's degree. We do have a high level of training, and with that comes expertise. We're able to diagnose hearing loss for all patients and all insurances, which is very important to be able to give that firm diagnosis. Most often, we are not commission-based, so we're not driven by sales. And our overall goal is to help patients hear better. We want you to be successful. We want you to hear better and be able to interact easier with people on a daily basis. In the community, you might have the opportunity to work with a hearing instrument specialist if that's something you would like to do. The difference is that a hearing instrument specialist can practice with a high school degree, and then they would need to complete a 3 to 6 month online training program. Just as a reference point, with audiology, the only degree that is available to be an audiologist is a doctoral program. It's a doctoral degree, which is 4 years of education. Hearing instrument specialists are commission-based. They're driven by sales, and their goal is to obtain a higher sales volume. So some things to know about hearing aids. One of the biggest conversations that I tend to have in the office with people is that most insurances do not cover hearing aids. So if you think that your insurance might have a benefit, very few do. But if you think you might have some coverage, go ahead, give your insurance company a call before you come in. So that way you have an understanding and we can have a more in-depth conversation. So again, if most insurances do not cover them, it tends to be an out-of-pocket expense for people. The other thing to know is that every hearing aid is ordered for every patient. So we are selecting the device that suits your needs, the color that you prefer, the features that you desire, and it is ordered in your name. So that does take a little bit of time on the ordering process. I'll go over that in a little bit. And the other thing to know about hearing aids is that at the end of the hearing aid, the part that physically goes into your ear is the acoustic tip. So you might require custom ear molds, or you could need a dome. I'll explain those a little bit more, but that is basically a part that's going to go into your ear that allows things to stay in place. So acoustic tips. So some people might need or might require, based on their hearing loss, a custom-made ear mold. That ear mold would allow for an exact fit of your ear. As you can imagine, it's custom made for you. And this ear mold would be recommended due to the degree of your hearing loss, the type of hearing loss you might have. It does require additional ordering time because, again, it is a custom-made product. And we do take an impression of your ear. And from there, we would send it out to a lab for them to manufacture just for you. The other type of tip that is an option, again, going inside your ear, is called a dome. It's more of a universal fit. We're not going to plug up your ear like an ear mold would. Again, going back to what your hearing loss is, this might be an option, this might not be an option, but that would be a discussion that we would have together. A dome would be something that would be replaced regularly. And again, it is an option for certain styles of hearing aids. So what's new with hearing aid technology? So every year, hearing aid technology evolves. Just like you get a new cell phone after a couple years, you're seeing new features, new car models, they tend to evolve over time. Same for the hearing aid industry. With each year, with each model, each technology that comes out, they are improved. The body style is more slimmer, more sleek compared to older models. A lot of people have a reference point of that big, bulky beige banana sitting behind the ear, which, yes, we can still do that, but there's a lot more options out there, much smaller, more discreet. Hearing aids, there are different hearing aids out there. They all offer different things. So that would be something that we need to figure out what works for you, what your needs are. Every year with those advancements in technology, one of the biggest advancement that comes out is how those hearing aids are going to work in noise. Each year, hearing aids are going to work harder, better, faster in noise than the generation before, than that previous year's technology. That is one area where hearing aid companies put a lot of energy and effort and research into making improvements. And then another thing you might have heard about is Bluetooth. So a lot of hearing aids out there, probably the majority of them, have Bluetooth technology loaded in. It comes standard on pretty much every level, every cost of hearing aid, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. So Bluetooth, it is again available on a majority of hearing aids. Some people say, well, I don't want anything to do with Bluetooth. I don't have a smartphone. I don't have a tablet. That's fine. You can use Bluetooth if you want to. It is not a requirement. The thing is that you do need a Bluetooth device though. So if you don't have a smartphone, you don't have an iPad, then you won't be able to have that option. I do have some people who have a family member who they might visit frequently, and that family member might connect hearing aids to their Bluetooth device to make a simple adjustment on an as-needed basis. So that's a consideration for some people as well. So why Bluetooth? What's the big benefit of it? So one of the big things is Bluetooth allows, with compatible devices, direct audio streaming. Now, what that means is through Bluetooth, through a wireless transmission of signal, if you have a device that works, you might be able to listen to phone calls coming from, say, an iPhone or a certain Android directly to your hearing aids. You would hear it through both hearing aids, essentially hands-free. If you like to go to the gym and again, you have a compatible device, you might want to listen to music at the gym. Again, with direct audio streaming, you'd be able to listen to music from your phone directly to both hearing aids, being able to work out. You have to be within a certain range, so you couldn't leave your phone in the car and then go inside the gym and listen to a whole studio album of something. Wouldn't work that well, but within direct line of sight in a certain range of distance. Another option for Bluetooth, which is actually the biggest draw for the most people, is hearing aid companies, manufacturers offer free apps. And within those apps, you have the option to have a handheld remote, essentially. With that app, your hearing aids would be connected to it, and you could discreetly in the palm of your hand make an adjustment for volume, make an adjustment for sound quality. So say you're in a noisy environment, or even if you're sitting at a small little table, probably like at a senior center or a coffee shop, and you wanted to make an adjustment, just pull out your phone, do that easily, discreetly on your phone, and not have to touch the back of your ear. A final option for Bluetooth, which has gotten some people out of a fair bit of trouble over the years, is a function called Find My Hearing Aids. Now, it's actually a GPS function where using location services, should those hearing aids be misplaced, should they be lost, or you're traveling, you forget them in a hotel somewhere, if they are connected by Bluetooth, you would be able to locate them using that GPS function. Now, the caveat to that is the Find My Hearing Aids function is not going to say they are in your house, in this room, in this corner, under this piece of paper. It's not going to get that specific, but it's better than nothing. And it would let you know whether they're in your house, the grocery store, or in an airport or another state. So, you know, a nice benefit, a nice thing to have. Another consideration is technology level. People come in and they say, oh, my friend spent $10,000 on hearing aids. Well, cost is determined by the level of technology. $10,000 is a lot of money. That, in my mind, says that they've gotten premium technology somewhere. So one thing to think about when choosing that technology level, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, are what are your listening needs? What are your demands in your everyday lifestyle? So kind of expanding on this, what are your listening needs? Are you working? Are you working full-time? Are you working part-time? Are you volunteering? Do you find yourself in a variety of meetings with high listening demands? Are you responsible for giving presentations? Do you find yourself in noisy groups? So, are you going to restaurants? Are you going to big gatherings where there's a lot of activity? And also, do you have difficulty with conversations with family, with your grandchildren, with friends? What do you find that you're missing out on? What areas are you having trouble with? And then also, what is your lifestyle? Do you go to restaurants regularly? Do you go once a week? Do you go multiple times a week? Do you go to large events frequently? Are you attending a book group? You might be at a book group where you're leading it or you're participating, and based on the setup of the room, you're not able to hear everybody in your discussion. Are you going to group events? And other considerations might be if you regularly attend concerts, theater performances. What is important to you? So what to choose? Again, higher technology, more expensive. It also comes with the best noise management features. So the higher that you climb in technology, the more that hearing aid is going to work to recognize, react, respond, turn down that background noise, pull out that important speech information, that conversation that you want to have face to face. Also, the higher that you climb in technology, the more that hearing aid will be able to fine tune. How can we shape that sound for your hearing loss, for your comfort? Lower technology, I kind of refer to this as entry level. It is appropriate noise management for those who don't frequently go to restaurants. They're not working full time. You might be retired. You're not going to parties very often. You're not going to loud gatherings. It is a very strong hearing aid. However, you're not going to get as much fine tuning as that higher level would provide for you. So different styles of hearing aids are out there. So there's two different styles. The first option is an over the ear. So I think that that's what a lot of people kind of have a reference point for. The first over the ear hearing aid that I have listed is called a right, also known as a receiver in the ear. It's actually displayed on that top right photo. So the hearing aid would sit behind your ear, and then there's actually a little thin wire that runs right along the side of your ear. At the end of that wire is a little speaker. That speaker goes directly into the ear canal, and it would have a dome on it most often, or we could add an ear mold if needed. It's very low profile, it's very discreet. A lot of people out there have hearing aids like this, and not very many people are aware of it because it is very blending. It's very, again, low profile. So another option of hearing aid is called a BTE, or a behind the ear hearing aid. I think this is the most traditional style of hearing aid that we think of. So again, that hearing aid would go over the ear, but this time it requires an ear mold. And that is in the picture in the bottom right. So again, that ear mold would be custom made, and it would fit just you and only you. Generally, behind the ear hearing aids tend to pack more power. They have more volume available. So if someone has a significant amount of hearing loss, we would likely be talking about a behind the ear style in order to provide appropriate amplification for you. The other style of hearing aid is called a custom. So as you can imagine, it is custom made for you. So these are hearing aids that are entirely in the ear. They're kind of filling the entire bowl of the ear, or we can shrink down the size and get it exclusively in that ear canal. So an in the ear or in the canal is going to be bigger. A completely in the canal or a CIC is going to be very, very inconspicuous, kind of seated very deeply in the ear. One thing to think about as well, As with different styles of hearing aids, there are different considerations. So I kind of mentioned it before, but cosmetics is a big driving factor for people. Do you care that people see the hearing aids? Do you want it to blend? There are different different colors out there that blend with hair or skin tone. So we work with you to make it the most, cosmetically appealing as possible. Another consideration is dexterity. Do you have arthritis? Do you have sensitivity or numbness in your fingers? You might have had a traumatic injury to a finger. So are you missing part of a finger? Do you have limited range of motion in an arm? Is that going to be a consideration for putting that hearing aid in? Your anatomy. Is your ear canal big enough to accommodate a hearing aid that would go entirely in the ear, if that's what's important to you, if that's what you prefer? We might not be able to put all the parts of that hearing aid in the ear if your ear canal is small. Again, hearing loss. What is appropriate for your hearing loss? Oftentimes people will say, well, I don't want anything visible. I don't want people to see it. I don't want it to be big. I want a hearing aid that goes entirely in my ear because I don't want anybody to know. But their hearing loss would not be in alignment with that, meaning you have normal hearing in the low pitch bass tones, and then they want to put a custom hearing aid in the ear. Essentially, when we do something like that, we're kind of erasing that good normal hearing because we're plugging up the ear. And then when we take away that good normal hearing, we're going to have to give it back to you through amplification. So not the best option, and that's a conversation that we would have together. The final option is the battery type, rechargeable batteries. That's a big thing now. Rechargeable batteries have been out for several years. They're lithium ion, just like a cell phone, tablet, PC, AirPods, things like that. And those batteries last you a whole listening day. You charge them up the next day, put them in, and you're good to go. Some people don't want to have to deal with buying batteries. They might have dexterity concerns again. And with that, can they change a battery? Can they replace that battery on a daily basis? The other option is disposable. So if you don't want to deal with a rechargeable battery, do you tend to travel a lot? Do you have intermittent electricity at your house? Do you tend to lose power during snowstorms or bad weather? Or if you're working, depending upon what your work schedule is, what your shift is, you might not have the opportunity to recharge that battery during your workday. So that would be a reason to go for a disposable. Again, these are all things that we talk about to make sure that it works for you. So makes and models of hearing aids. Here at Baystate, in both our Springfield and our Palmer locations, we do work with several major manufacturers. There are a lot of manufacturers out there, but we work with 3 of them. And we'll work with you to determine the best one with its features and technology that meets your lifestyle, your needs. So the brands that we work with here at Baystate include Au.D, Resound, and Phonak. And then finally, once you decide and we have that conversation, how long until you get those hearing aids? So the style of hearing aid and that acoustic tip, whether we're doing an ear mold or we're doing a dome, all of that is going to dictate the timeline. How long until we say, okay, this is what we're going to do until you come back and you get fit. So it takes about 1 to 2 weeks or so. If we were to do that receiver in the ear, again, it's that hearing aid that goes behind the ear, the little wire with the speaker tip inside, with a dome. So that kind of universal fit. It's pretty fast turnaround because we're not getting anything custom made per se. And then with an ear mold or a custom made hearing aid, so a custom product, anything we have to send out for manufacturer, you're looking at about 4 to 6 weeks because it has to go to a lab for them to manufacture for you. So Jeanne did mention at the beginning about scheduling an appointment. So after this presentation, if you decide you would like to schedule an appointment for a hearing test, and then to discuss some amplification options pending those test results, you can call our scheduling department. The phone number is listed on the screen. You would select option number 2 to get right into that certain scheduling line. And something to keep in mind is that an order from your referring provider will also be required. So your doctor, your physician, whomever you see for general healthcare needs would need to order you to come in for a hearing test. Thank you very much.
Next slide, please. Hi, this is Jeanne again, and I just wanted to let you know that we're going to offer some free hearing screenings at our location in Palmer at Baystate Wing Hospital during May of this year, 2024. And if you are interested, you can call and leave me a message. My name's Jeanne at 413-794-2235. I want to thank Lauren and Kirsten for their great presentations with some amazing information that I hope will help you decide how to take care of your hearing needs or the hearing needs of a loved one or a friend. Next slide, please. So now this is the opportunity to ask some questions. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box.
Thank you all for that great presentation. And it looks like there are some questions coming through. The first question is, does ongoing tinnitus indicate or exacerbate hearing loss?
That's a great question. Tinnitus is a phenomenon where you have a ringing or a noise in your ears. It can be in one or both ears, and it can be constant or intermittent. It can change in the quality of sound. Some people describe it as a ringing, a buzzing, crickets. Some people feel like it sounds like undistinguishable voices or music. Generally, the tinnitus is an indication that you've had damage to your hearing, or changes to the cells in your cochlea. And so tinnitus is an indication of a change to your hearing. Sometimes you can still have normal hearing, and it's just that your hearing is not as good as it used to be. If you have tinnitus in just one ear, that's an indication that you would definitely want to come for a hearing test or schedule an appointment with an ear, nose, and throat physician, because one of the things we like to say is both ears go with you everywhere you go. And the same thing happens to both ears because they're always with you. So if you've got something going on one ear that's different from the other ear, then you definitely want to have your hearing evaluated and potentially a medical evaluation as well. Tinnitus does not exacerbate hearing loss, so it's not going to make your hearing loss get worse. But tinnitus can change as your hearing loss worsens, and it naturally will over time. And for some people, the tinnitus may go away as their hearing changes. That's also a possibility. An interesting phenomenon is that hearing aids often make the tinnitus softer or unnoticeable while you're wearing the hearing aid, and it will suppress it for a short time after you take the hearing aids off. This happens in about 75 to 80% of the population. So generally, if someone wears hearing aids all day, they don't notice the tinnitus while they have the hearing aid on. It's not there when they take it off. It's not there long enough to fall asleep. But if they wake up in the middle of the night or the next morning, the tinnitus is going to be back. I see there's some other questions about tinnitus as well. Let me just take a second. Another question is, does loud noise make the tinnitus worse? So loud noise exposure can damage your hearing. And if you damage your hearing additionally, it can make the tinnitus worse. So the answer is yes, loud noise can make hearing worse and make tinnitus worse. Hearing aids typically do not make the tinnitus worse at all. As I said, they generally make it better. Regarding other technologies that could potentially mitigate the ringing that you hear in your ears, if someone's bothered by it at night when they're sleeping, we recommend playing another sound, such as a noise machine or a fan, anything that can help distract you from hearing the tinnitus. It doesn't make the tinnitus goes away, but it gives your brain something else to think about, so it's not as anxiety provoking as it could be. And if you do have tinnitus or hearing loss, it is very important to wear hearing protection when you're exposed to loud noise, which could be something simple as using a chainsaw, lawnmower, snowblower, or things like attending loud music concerts, or streaming music to a set of headphones or AirPods. Generally, the loudness of music when you're streaming is safe if it's at less than half volume or less. When you go greater than half volume, that's when you start to be in the range that could put your hearing at risk for damage. I see a question about hearing aids and do you need to wear them all the time? So the short answer is you want to wear them all the time you're awake. In the words of a favorite physicians of mine, if your pants are on, your hearing aids are on. It's that simple. Generally, people will wear the hearing aids put the hearing aids on in the morning as they get dressed and wear them throughout the day until shortly before you go to bed. You would take them off for any water activities such as swimming or showering. This is a great question. Does Medicare cover the cost of a hearing test? Medicare covers a hearing test if your physician refers you. So you need to talk to your primary care provider or a specialist and get them to refer you for a hearing test, and then Medicare will cover a hearing test once every 13 months. We do provide services to children with hearing loss. The American Academy of Pediatrics. So one of the questions is, do we provide services for children with hearing loss? And if so, when are they recommended to have a screening? Most pediatricians follow recommendations by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and hearing screenings generally start around age 3. All newborns are also screened for hearing loss before they're discharged from the hospital. If you ever have concerns about a child in hearing loss, you should discuss it with your pediatrician, and they will work with you to determine if you need to be referred for a hearing test. Another great question is, can you use just one hearing aid instead of 2, and can you use them part-time? Again, you should use them full-time. The reason is that your brain adapts to hearing with the hearing aids better when you listen to them all the time. I tell people it's kind of like wearing a custom orthotic for your shoe. You want that custom orthotic in all your shoes so it helps you whenever you're walking. And it's the same with the hearing aids. We want them in your ears all the time whenever you're awake and listening. Some people will say, well, I live alone. I don't have anything to hear at home. And I say, no, there's plenty of things to hear at home. You can hear environmental sounds better, alerting sounds. You can hear sounds from the outside that will help you know if there's something going on in your neighborhood that's important. It also will help you hear the TV better, and you won't have to play it as loud. So your brain adapts to hearing and listening with the hearing aids much better when you wear them consistently in both ears and on a full-time basis. Another question is that if you want hearing aids, but finances are a concern, is it okay to get one hearing aid? Absolutely. One hearing aid is better than none. And I would rather see you wearing one hearing aid and improving your hearing than continuing to struggle communicating in your daily life with your friends and family. So one hearing aid is definitely better than none. Oh, this is a great question. So lots of people notice that Costco sells hearing aids, and that sometimes you can see over-the-counter hearing aids in drugstores. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the services through big box stores like Costco. What happens is that generally at this point, they do not sell major manufacturer hearing aids any longer. Most of the big manufacturers have stopped selling to Costco. And so you're getting small manufacturers, and when they were selling major manufacturer hearing aids, the hearing aids were de-featured. That means that some of the noise management features and some of the frequency tuning features were removed. And that's what allowed Costco to sell them at a lower price than a audiological clinic, either a private practice in your community or at a hospital. So the hearing aids that you generally get at Costco and places like that do not have the full breadth of features that you would get at a private or hospital-based hearing clinic. There are over-the-counter hearing aids at some places like CVS. These are really designed to be more of a hearing assistance. They're not fine-tuned to your hearing loss the way they can do at an audiological clinic. Many of them are not even programmed to your hearing loss, and they basically just provide a general level of volume increase and often do not take into account where your hearing loss is and tuned to the different pitches that you have trouble hearing at. Let's see. Another question was, some screenings are free and others have a fee. This is also a really good question. When you see free hearing screenings advertised, oftentimes it's because that facility is not qualified to bill insurances for hearing aids. Not always, but generally it's because a hearing instrument specialist is providing the services. As Lauren mentioned earlier in the presentation, and Kirsten also mentioned, is that audiologists have a doctorate degree. So that's 8 years of college education, and we're trained in a medical model. So we're able to diagnose hearing loss and make recommendations for further medical intervention or recommending hearing aids. When someone provides a free hearing test for the purposes of fitting hearing aids, basically they are just assessing where your hearing is so that they can program a hearing aid, but they're not taking into account your case history, your hearing history, your medical history, and looking at you as the big picture for the best recommendations for your whole health care relating to your hearing loss and the symptoms that you have. One of the questions is, does tinnitus get louder over time? As I mentioned, tinnitus can change. So it can get louder, it can get softer, and it can change in quality. And I appreciate there's a suggestion here about not using senior in the title. And absolutely, I think that's a great question. Assessing hearing loss and hearing aids is for people of all ages. And we always appreciate those reminders. I want to thank you all for attending today's program. It was really a pleasure to share this information and to answer all of your questions. Thank you so much. And Sue, I don't know if I'm going to hand it back to you or we just conclude the program.
You did a great job, and we've concluded our program. Thank you to all the attendees, and thank you to our amazing expert presenters today. We appreciate you.
Thank you.